So one day I was at the gym, just doing cardio on a treadmill. It was pretty empty, not very many people were there on a Thursday at noon. I always use the treadmills in front of the mirrors so I can pay attention to the surroundings. I was on a treadmill 2 away from the end and all of them were empty except one at the opposite end. This man gets on a treadmill right next to me, which is weird, but okay. I have my headphones in and I'm watching a show, and every so often I look up at the mirrors just to check on my surroundings, and every time I look up, this man is staring right at me. Around 37 minutes of my 45-minute planned cardio workout, he drops his phone, but he drops it on the side that I'm on, off his treadmill. I was watching in the mirror and he basically threw it down next to me. He gets off the treadmill, picks his phone up, and then he taps me on my shoulder. Now, I never took my headphones out, so I couldn't really hear what he was saying, but it seemed like he introduced himself, but I never caught his name. And then he asked my name and I gave him a fake one. He then said something else and it looked like I couldn't really tell, I couldn't hear him, but it looked like he was saying, "Do you want fudge?" for some reason. I don't know why he would ask me that, but reading his lips, it looks like he said, "Do you want fudge?" Again, I couldn't hear him. I just nodded and I returned to my show, clearly uninterested in whatever he was saying. At this point, I only had like 5 minutes left, and every time I looked in the mirror, he was staring right at me. I finished my workout and I went to the stretching area that is near the treadmills, but I'm still in front of the mirrors. I also took a glance at how long he'd been on the treadmill, and it was something like 8 minutes or so, but it wasn't long enough to get a workout or even a warm-up. When I moved to the stretching area, he moved to the closest machine and was still staring at me. I actually caught him staring at me when I was on my back and I had my legs behind my head. Yes, that is a stretch that I do. He then walked a little closer, and at that point I took off and I got out of there. I ran out the door. I didn't look back at all. I got to my car, sat down, turned it on, and I grabbed my seatbelt. And as I was about to click it into place, my passenger side door opened and I saw that man reach across the passenger seat. I yelled at him to get out and off my car, and I pulled out the parking spot with both doors wide open while he was holding onto the door. He fell off the car after holding on for about 20 meters. I drove a mile down the road with my passenger side door open. When I got home, I noticed that the man dropped a bag on the floor by the passenger seat. In that bag, he had duct tape, a hammer, and some spermicidal lube. Then the next day I went to the gym to report him, but like I said, I never got his name, and the gym didn't want to look at the cameras with me right there and said that once they figure out who he was, they'll let me know and they'll talk to him, which really didn't feel like they were doing anything about the situation. So the next week I canceled my membership and I never went back to that gym. I ended up having my first boyfriend. His name was James, and I felt like I struck gold with him. He was 19, sweet, was tall and slender, eyes like sapphires, light skin, and long black hair. I was also his first girlfriend, as he was adorably shy. We hit it off very quickly, becoming official by maybe the 3rd day after meeting. When he'd greet me, he always had a beautiful smile when he'd say my name. We'd always meet up before and after classes and at lunch, kissing and making out together. I honestly thought I was in love with him. The only problem was his mother. Her name was Debbie. She was 42 and widowed for several years. As James was an only child, she seemed overprotective of him. A month after our relationship began, the weird stuff began. One day, James and I were hanging out together after classes, and I heard someone impatiently honking their car's horn. I looked behind us and I saw Debbie seated in the car. She was honking her horn and giving me a strange look. It was a look of suspicion and a bit of hate, which threw me off. She honked once again, and it was hard. She waved an arm like she was telling James, "Let's go." Suddenly, James stood up and said, "I'm sorry, babe, but my mom's here. I'll see you later." He rushed over, practically jumping into her car. I could hear her shout at him, "Jimmy, who the hell is that girl?" Your girlfriend or something?" His response made me feel uneasy. "Yes, she is, but don't worry. You're my number one, mommy." They drove away, leaving me wondering what to think. I still loved James and wanted our relationship to work, but over the days and weeks that followed, the weird stuff continued. He eventually stopped hanging out between classes because his mother might need him. I tolerated this, but I was uncomfortable by his own devotion to his mother. One time I asked him if we could have a date somewhere else. His response was, "When we do go out, mom's got to go with us." I confronted him about that once and we had a big fight. He said he was all she had and he was unwilling to separate from her. I reminded him that I was his girlfriend and needed time with him too. A couple days later, we made up and, things improved. 6 months after that, we became a couple. The worst occurred. On the school bleachers, we sat together, kissing and cuddling, going as far as second base. We paused once, holding each other. I whispered into his ear that I love him, and I'll never forget his response in my ear. "I love you too, Debbie." I pretty much threw him away from me in shock and disgust. He said his mother's name, not mine. Grossed out, I stood up, shouting, and I asked him, "What the hell is wrong with you? You said your mother's name." He honestly looked very embarrassed, but his response was the last straw. He said, "Oh my God, baby, I'm sorry, but you're a way better kisser than my mother." I had enough and I began to turn and walk around the bleachers. At the bottom row, I heard him plead, "Baby, please, I love you." I glanced at him, snarled, and I flipped him off. I continued walking away, never looking back. I never saw James again after that, as he dropped out of college shortly. I went on with my life and I didn't think about him at all, until 10 years later. Scanning Facebook one day, I became curious and I looked him up. It was a move I regretted. His profile photo made me wonder if that was actually the same guy, but it was. He was 29, had gained a lot of weight, terrible complexion. His once beautiful black hair was now a greasy ponytail. He was unemployed and still living with his mother. I then viewed his profile pictures and instantly regretted that. The first was titled, "My Mommy." To my horror, it was filled with weird and honestly creepy photos of his mother. The worst was the newest photo, taken a few hours earlier. It featured his mother standing in the doorway, wearing a sheer lingerie nightie and nothing underneath. It was titled, "My Mommy in the Morning." Sickened, I viewed the other photo file. The contents made my jaw drop. The photos featured various body parts of James that showed scratches, cuts, bruising, different colors, and even marks that looked like burns. Turns out James was a little self-harmer and he punished himself frequently. The newest photo was 2 hours old and showed a nasty cigarette burn on his wrist. It was entitled, "I made Mommy angry today. This is my punishment. Sorry, Mommy." I immediately exited the Facebook page, horrified and nauseous. I didn't know what to think. I obviously didn't want to see that again. And I still haven't, even after getting a friend request from him. Somehow, he knew that I had seen his page. So I denied him and vowed to ignore him. In 2017, I got a message from him. His mother had just died and he was eager, begging to see me again. She had left him a lot of money and he was a millionaire, it turned out. I almost hated to do it, but I told him to go away and honestly, I blocked him. I heard nothing from him over a year. Then I got a strange email. It was from a man saying that he was James' uncle. It was Debbie's brother, Mike. What he told me disturbed me. He had gone to check on James after not hearing from him in 2 months. He found James in the second floor bedroom, lying on his mother's bed, wearing her nightgown, and his hair was in curlers. He had been staring up at the ceiling, almost in a trance, babbling, "Mommy, Mommy, when are you coming home, Mommy? I'm waiting, Mommy." When James had seen his uncle staring at him in shock, James had said to him, "Hi, Uncle Mike. Have you seen Mama? Is she coming home?" Mike told him that he called his mother on the phone downstairs. James had deemed delighted, but Mike had called a services group and eventually hauled James away to a sanitarium. He remains there now, and I can honestly hope that he's getting the help that he requires. I really feel bad for James. His entire life was wasted because of a woman, his own mother, who refused to let him live his life. This happened quite a few years ago when I was in college. My friends and I were living on the ground floor of an apartment, and my room was in front of the building, and outside my window was the front garden. My boyfriend and I had literally just got done playing video games. I was tired, so I put my head on the pillow and glanced to my right, which is where the window was. There was a gap between the curtain and the window, and I was met with a pair of eyes watching me. We both had the instinct to look away and quickly look back. At this point, I shouted to my ex that there was someone watching us from outside. He jumped and opened the window and shouted things at that person. He could see the grass was disturbed, so someone had been there, and by the looks, it had been more than once. From further inspection the next morning, we found out that he had jumped a small hedge and exited through my neighbor's garden. We never found out who that man was. Years ago, when I was a senior in high school, I had a day where I just wasn't feeling so great. So I decided, as I occasionally did, just to skip out on my last 2 classes and head home. That meant no school buses, and obviously, I had to walk 3 miles home. Before the age of computer and cell phones, this was a pretty long and boring hike to take, so I decided to take a shortcut through some small wooded trail along the creek. Eventually, I came across a dead cat lying in the middle of a trail. As I walked around it, I noticed another dead cat to my left. I looked to my right, and sure enough, there was another. Creeped out, I looked behind me and noticed 2 more, and yet another 2 in front of me. They were all laid out in a giant circle with one in the middle, almost like a half-ass pentagram. I sped up the pace and got the hell out of there. I never took that trail again. Thinking back, a really weird thing is that there was no visible damage to any of the cats. No blood, no cuts, nothing. They were just dead. Our old house was on a corner. We had a backyard along with a side yard with a small deck that wrapped around the back. The dining room had a patio door that led out to the back, and we would have barbecues and such back there. When I was about 14, we only had 1 desktop computer and 1 laptop for the family. My brother and I would fight over the desktop because it had Diablo 2 installed on it, so I would use the laptop to write music. On one particular night, my brother had a friend over and they were downstairs doing whatever, and I was at the dining room table on the laptop. As I was wrapping up in my writing, I didn't pay much attention to my surroundings. I heard a knock on the patio door, which startled me. I looked up expecting my brother or his friend, but the basement had a door that led onto the back deck as well, so that's why I thought it was one of them. Standing at the door and waving was a person, wearing a Halloween pig mask. Thinking it was my brother or his friend, I mouthed, "Good one," and gave the person a finger and walked away. As soon as they left, I went downstairs to give them shit, and to my surprise and dismay, they were both sitting on the couch playing PlayStation. They swore up and down it wasn't either one of them, and there was no way that one of them would have had time to get downstairs and unmask before getting on the couch. To this day, I have no idea who it was that knocked and waved at my door.
The summer after I graduated from high school, I left work early and went up to my parents' cabin in northern Michigan. I spent that night at the beach watching the sunset. Once the sun went down and it became nearly pitch black, I got to my car and started driving down the highway. After about 10 seconds of being at speed, there was an older Tahoe, maybe late 90s, that started riding really close to me and flashing its high beams. So I got up to about 60 in a 45, and they were still on my butt. I pulled off to the side of the road that my parents' cabin is off of, and they took the same turn. I thought this seemed weird because there's only about 30 or 40 houses on the road. So I went all the way to the end, which is usually a dead end, but it leads to a maintenance area for the golf course nearby. The truck was still following me. At this point, I was freaking out because if I pulled into the house, they'd know where we lived and they were still following close by. Took a ton of random turns and the truck kept following every single turn for about 15 minutes. I finally had a chance to make a turn with the traffic going through the intersection that gave me a few seconds of a head start. I pulled down a side street, went up about 100 yards, and turned off all of my lights and waited. The truck slowly drove by the perpendicular street and kept going. I booked it home. I pulled my car around the side away from the main road and pulled every curtain. For an 18-year-old, I was scared as hell that night.
This happened when I was about 12 years old. I was walking back to my apartment after dropping my younger brother off at school. His was different than mine, and we had the holiday off, so I was going to be home alone for a while today. I stopped at a convenience store on my way back home to stock up on some goodies. I was honestly looking forward to having a little fun by myself, so I grabbed, gummy bears, chocolate, some lotion, the usual. So my apartment was on the second floor of a complex, and the staircase is made of white stone. Anytime anyone walked up and down the stairs, the footsteps echo a bit. As others lived nearby, I'd hear their footsteps at weird hours, which is unnerving at night. Anyway, as I approached the stairs, I froze. Sprawled across the bottom steps was a sleeping man, lying flat on his back, snoring softly. He was probably in his 40s, his clothes were dirty and raggedy, and he smelled like body odor and alcohol. Unfortunately, he was almost blocking my way up to my apartment. I stood there holding my bag of goodies, unsure what to do. After a few minutes, I bravely tiptoed past him, managing a few steps before a sound behind me halted me. A rough-sounding throat-clearing noise, and a nasty-sounding cough. I slowly turned and he was just sitting up, staring at me. So, I'm not that big of a person. I'm pretty small, honestly. I'm a good-looking person, which didn't help. He smiled broadly, saying, "Well, hello there, little guy. You alone? You want some company?" I remember yelping in fear and rushing up the stairs, fortunately finding my keys and practically throwing myself inside, locking the door quickly. I heard him slowly going up the stairs, so I put down my bag and I grabbed my crowbar and I kept it near the door with me. As I positioned myself, he knocked hard on the door, making me jump. And he said, "Hey, come on, little guy, let me in. I got a present for you." I didn't say anything, trying to keep quiet. He knocked again, much harder, trying the doorknob, but finding it locked. Then he said, "Hey, just let me in. Don't be unfriendly, I want to talk to you." I finally shouted, and I told him to go away and leave me alone. Cliche, but I didn't know what else to say. Then he said, "Last chance, just let me in, or you're in trouble." I saw that bottle of lotion, just let me use it. I tapped the door with my crowbar, and I asked him, "You hear that? I'm armed. Now leave me alone. I'll hit you if I have to." I tried to sound braver than I felt. I heard him chuckle, but he kept knocking on the door. Suddenly, I heard someone shout, "Hey, who the hell are you?" I heard the man rush down the stairs, and then the shouter in pursuit. Everything was silent for a few minutes, then someone knocked on my door, and it was my neighbor. He asked me to open the door because the man is gone. I recognized the voice and cautiously opened the door. He told me he heard the man as he had been home on vacation. He chased him away and up the street for a bit. He kindly asked if I was going to be okay. Relieved, I told him I was going to be fine, and I'm good by myself. He told me okay, but warned me to always keep the doors locked and never open them for anyone I didn't know. Until my brother got home at 3. I did have fun alone. Privately. I'm glad he was home though. I never told anyone what happened. To this day, I always exercise caution in my surroundings. Unfortunately, the kind neighbor died a few years later, after making the mistake of doing his own car's brakes. But I never forgot his advice and his good deed. Thankfully, I never saw the homeless man again. The thought that always chills me is, what if Mr. Smith, who lived next door, had not been home then? Would I have been a victim of the homeless man? I sometimes wonder if he has successfully victimized anyone. I almost don't want to know. The lesson here is, always be aware of your surroundings. Be ready to fight if you have to, and try not to panic. And above all, always keep your keys ready and with you.
Imagine this, nestled comfortably on your couch, a bowl of popcorn by your side, the blanket rustling as it's draped over your legs, ready to lose yourself in the cinematic world. The soft hum of the air conditioner in the background, an evening that should be the epitome of relaxation, suddenly turned into a real-life thriller. Last year, this was me. A night like any other, the door lock's sudden uninvited noise shattered the tranquility. A sound not dissimilar to a key, yet distorted wrong, the eerie creaking of the door echoing in the silence. The next moments passed in a haze of terror. Creeping towards the door, heart pounding in my chest, the faint moonlight outside casting long shadows illuminating the figure of a man. A stranger. He was fumbling with the lock, his eyes darting around nervously, the faint rustling of leaves outside accompanying his actions. Retreating, I scrabbled for my phone, hidden behind the couch, praying he wouldn't see me. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the blanket seemed deafeningly loud. With the phone clutched tightly in my trembling hands, I dialed the police, my gaze never leaving the figure at the door. The faint beep of the phone dialing, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I searched for something, anything to defend myself, but found nothing. But then, the man moved. He peered through the window, his eyes roving around the dark room. The soft creaking of the window as he leaned against it. I held my breath, hoping against hope that the darkness would hide me. Each second that ticked by felt like an eternity until I heard it. The distant wail of sirens growing louder with each passing second. The man moved swiftly, disappearing into the night, the crunching of gravel under his feet as he ran. But as I breathed a sigh of relief, another figure appeared at the window, the soft rustle of clothes as he moved. There had been 2 of them, 2 strangers trying to invade my sanctuary. Soon the police arrived and upon inspection found the scratched lock. The soft murmur of their voices as they inspected the scene, the evidence of their failed attempt to enter my home. That night is now a year behind me, a chilling memory that still haunts my dreams. The soft click of the shotgun as I loaded each night. A stark reminder of the night my home was almost invaded.
For Facebook and Google games, I searched for video game websites. Most were fine, but an experience with one particular website ruined going on random sites for games. I'm a girl who loves playing a variety of games, be it shooting zombies, puzzle games, or word games. After searching for a game site, I found one. I'd rather not say the name of the site, but be aware of it, for it's a bad site. At first I had fun with the random games, playing many. One day I found an area of the site that had videos and pictures. Curious, I tried the pictures tab. A pop-up suddenly appeared, asking me to turn off my pop-up blocker to view the pictures and video tabs. Stupidly, I turned off my pop-up blocker. The photos began with cute animals and then became weird. I began to see pictures of deformed and disfigured people in various poses, each weirder and creepier than the last one. The last scared the hell out of me. It was a picture of someone in a dark room. It was a woman with a bruised and beaten face. Suddenly, it became a video of the face doing a time lapse of it rotting away. It suddenly seemed to look at the camera, and out came a loud shriek before it became a skull. The picture tab suddenly disappeared, and I was shaken. Recovering, I went to the video tab. What I saw made me regret clicking on the site. The screen became black until the words "Game On" appeared. I saw what looked like a video game play of the shooting games on the site. It looked like one of my favorite zombie shooting games. At first it was fun, then something caught my eye. One zombie was removing its mask before dying, revealing a real person. All the zombies on the ground were real people riddled with bullets. The screen went black, showing the words, "Next game, burger restaurant." The video was of a restaurant setting. 3 people were in the kitchen. There was 2 men prepping burgers and milkshakes. One woman, she was frying fries. Suddenly, the man who looked like the boss appeared. The conversation went like this. First, he approached the man that was making burgers. From the manager, it says, "A customer complained his burgers were overcooked." From the guy making the burgers, "Sorry, boss, I'll fix it." The manager, "Let me show you how to cook a burger." He suddenly grabbed the man by the back of his neck, and he shoved his face against the steaming hot grill. The poor guy screamed loudly, but the manager kept his grip. Finally, he pulled up the man, revealing a face that was badly burned. The manager, "Don't overcook the burgers again. Now get back to work." Seeing enough, I tried to exit the website. To my horror, it was frozen. I couldn't even move the mouse anymore. Then the manager approached the woman making fries. The manager, "Aren't those fries done yet?" The woman, "One more minute, boss." As he now grabbed her, I know what was about to happen. So I looked away, covering my eyes. As I heard a loud, hissing, bubbling noise, I realized I'd forgotten to remove my headphones. I practically threw them off, but accidentally I saw the screen. He had dunked her entire head into the deep fryer. He was holding her as she struggled. She struggled fiercely. Finally, he began to pull her up, and I had to look away. The screen suddenly said, "Don't look away now. Wait until you see the video of the milkshake maker. It'll be funny." Fed up and a little nauseous, I went under my table and unplugged the computer. The screen became black, no sounds. Throwing caution to the wind, I plugged it back in. The site was gone. What type of site did I go into? And I think it rerouted me somewhere that I didn't want to go to. My friends told me it was a deep web or dark web. I couldn't find it again. I had to remove 2 viruses off of the computer and set it back 3 weeks to get working again. I never explored the video game sites again after that. The only thing I wonder is, what would have happened if I stayed and watched? Above all else, I wonder if the victims or anyone else were ever found. Do yourselves a favor. If you want to play games on your computer, go only on sites that you know. Otherwise, who knows what you'll find if you dig deep enough. I had just started a summer job where I was a custodian cleaning classrooms in preparation for the upcoming school year. My dad worked for the town's district to get me this job. I was the youngest one in there. I was 20 years old at the time, and there were a handful of people that worked with me. They were usually off doing other tasks like waxing the floors and covering up foul writing on the walls with paint. The schools were empty besides the staff who was cleaning. Things were going fine for the first couple of weeks. Mostly, I was on my own wiping down desks and dusting while listening to music. It was nice and I enjoyed not having someone on my ass all day telling me what to do. After I had finished cleaning the middle school, the head custodian had sent me another woman. We'll call her Karen, who was my coworker, to go start cleaning the high school. She was a slacker who'd often go out and smoke cigarettes, but was really a nice lady. She didn't care what I did and was always off doing whatever she wanted, so yeah, basically I was alone. Again, I didn't mind because I liked the freedom, but I was taking up the bulk of the work. A few days had gone by and I finished cleaning a couple of hallways. It was time to move to the basement where the robotics and the woodworking classes were. I didn't think anything of it until I got down there. I noticed light was peeking through under the doorway of my classroom. The windows of the class were covered with shades. I found this really odd since it was the summer and no one was in the building besides Karen and I. I walked over and I peeked in the door window. The lamp was on the desk, but no one was inside. I proceeded to knock, no answer. After turning the knob, I realized the door was locked, so I used my key to open the door. A musty smell flooded my nose, and I decided to scope out the room. Maybe someone had forgotten to turn the lamp off. I disregarded that idea when I noticed the computer at the teacher's desk was on also. The screen looked weird. I'd never seen this layout before. The website was all black and with red writing on it. It also had a chat box. I didn't have time to read the chat because a sudden voice came from the doorway.
Can I help you?
It was a man, maybe in his early 40s, about 6 feet.
Oh, sorry. I'm just cleaning the classrooms and I didn't know if anyone was in here.
I said in an embarrassed tone.
Ah, so I see. Well, I appreciate that and don't worry about it, because I'm in here. I'm working on a few things, so sawdust is going to get everywhere again after you guys clean up. Anyway, so go ahead.
He said this in a very strange way, like he was hiding something. He walked over and he sat at his desk while closing the browser.
Okay, no problem.
I then proceeded to the door.
Wait, can I ask you a favor?
He said in a delirious way.
Yeah, sure.
I didn't really know what he was about to ask, and I couldn't find myself to say no. I just wanted to get out of there, as I was already creeped out. He said,
I have this, petition. It's to get more funding for the extracurricular classes, like art and woodworking.
He sounded so uncertain as if he made that up right on the spot, right out of thin air. I said, sure. I paused for a moment when he handed me the paper. It only had 2 other names on it. The petition required a full name, phone number, email, and address. I immediately felt uncomfortable, but I didn't know how to decline it, so I just added my information.
Thank you so much, dear. You have beautiful bone structure, by the way.
He said in such a creepy way.
Thanks.
I grabbed my cleaning supplies and I sped out of there. After that experience, I didn't really put much thought into it. Yes, he was creepy, but I didn't really have much evidence to persuade myself that he was out to get me or something, until I started running into him throughout the school. It became pretty frequent. It's as though he was watching me. Now I was concerned. I dismissed it because he just smiled at me or waved as if I saw him. Maybe I was overreacting. I mean, he was a teacher after all. Still, my gut feeling was telling me something wasn't right. Weeks went on and I started to notice him less and less. I only had a few more weeks at this job and then back to college I go. One day, the boss let everyone out early since it was almost 100 degrees. I got home and I decided to hang out with some friends. It was a group of us, about 5 or 6. My boyfriend's brother joined us at this time, which was unusual since he's not really a social person. He's really into technology, so he's always on a computer, which he built himself. He's also good at hacking and stuff like that. So anyways, that day he told me he needed to talk to me and it was serious. I was concerned because we weren't close, so it must have been something legit. He brought me to my friend's living room and pulled out his laptop. To my surprise, he was on the deep web.
So, you're up for a bid on the deep web?
He hesitated.
Wait, what?
I knew how the deep web worked. I would often listen to horror stories, but I've never been on it, so how would my info even be out there? It suddenly clicked. The web page matched the one I saw in the classroom a month back. I had also given my info to that guy. My heart felt like it had dropped into my stomach. I explained this to my boyfriend's brother. He advised me to call the police immediately, which is what we did. They did an investigation on the teacher and found activity on his computer. Not only that, but he had several girls' information along with pictures. Some of the girls were minors too. There was also wooden contraptions that they found in his home, in which he probably made at the shop. He probably planned to use them on these girls, or me. I was disgusted but relieved that he was caught. I often wonder, what would have happened if the page was never discovered? Would he have kidnapped me and killed me online for these sick people? I don't know, and I don't want to know. I changed my number and moved since the incident. This just goes to show you that you can never give out your personal information to anyone. I was 15 at the time, and I had come home from school on a Friday afternoon, ready to relax, kick back, and enjoy the short break. I had started using code about a year prior. Nothing too fancy, just basic Python, Java, HTTPS, stuff like that. And I was practicing it daily. Now, I had known about the dark web before this took place. I would sometimes buy weed off of it, but that was the extent of it. This particular day, however, I decided to venture further and really take a look at the dark web. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with the iceberg diagram representing the internet's content. For those who do not know, the surface web contains about 10% of the internet's content, while the deep and dark web take up about the other 90%. I was ready to see what it really held. I heard stories about what goes down on the deep web: murder, inhumane torture, CP, etc. I didn't really believe that they were all legit, so I hopped on Tor and I began to see what I could dig up. I started off by going on the hidden wiki and browsing through various websites, most of which contain illegal things such as drugs, hackers, and hitmen for hire, and lots of CP. I clicked on a random forum link, which took about a minute to load. I wish I could remember the name of it. It was a forum where people could pick a topic that they wanted to talk about, such as politics, dealing with mental health, and stuff like that. I noticed one of the topics was a pedo forum. I don't even want to go into detail about what I saw on there. There was one particular one that caught my eye. The link was in all red, while the rest were all black. It said, "Not for the weak, enter at your own risk." Curious as to what this was, I clicked on the link and it brought me to a chat room. I realized that nobody was saying anything in it, only sending links. This set off alarm bells in my head, red flags, because I had no idea what was going on in these links. This was a cluck situation. I wish I had listened to my gut feeling, which was telling me to close out while you still can. However, the ignorant, curious teen took over me, and I started setting up some protection for myself using the code that I had learned. I later realized that this amateur coding I did would not protect me from these advanced people with the malicious intent. I clicked on a random link and the page loaded surprisingly fast. It looked to be another chat room. I went to type hello or something, but it would not let me. I sighed and I began moving my mouse to go to the previous page when the noise went off. I had received the chat. The message said,
"Hello, new user. I see you have found my site. Would you like to continue?"
I tried typing again, but I still couldn't. The next message sent chills down my back, and my hands are shaking just as I'm recalling it right now. It read,
"No, son, not the keyboard."
I tried turning off my computer, but of course, nothing worked. Another message popped up saying,
"I'll guess I take that as a no."
The screen suddenly changed and the video began playing. It was a black screen, but I could hear a deep voice from a man, and it said,
"Unfortunately for you, you do not have a choice."
I grabbed a sticky note and I put it over the webcam, and the voice on the screen said,
"Ah, so we're playing games now, huh?"
The video then began to change, and I didn't realize the man was taking his hand off the camera. He was a short man, maybe about 5'11", but that brought me no comfort. He held up a knife and said,
"All right, name any body part."
I then for the first time noticed a cloth in the corner of the room covering something up that had a foot sticking out of it, which could only be a body, or I'm assuming. I had enough. I unplugged my computer and I laid on the floor, panting for hours until I could finally get up. Honestly, that was the last time I went on the dark web, deep web, whatever you want to call it. I now suffer from anxiety, and I won't touch a computer unless I have to. Just be safe out there, guys. A few years back, I decided to move out of my mother's house. I had a girlfriend at the time, and eventually she moved in with me. We were both 19, and we were still in the honeymoon phase of our relationship. Where we lived was pretty small and only had a few restaurants. And the other thing was, we were introverts, so we liked staying in our apartment. Being that we always stayed in our apartment and lived in a small town, we always ordered DoorDash from the same places. We didn't have many choices. One night we were in bed and I was feeling a little frisky. I turned on a Nightmare Files YouTube video because his voice usually gets her in the mood. So that's exactly what happened, like clockwork. I turned on one of his videos and she was all over me. Anyway, we were hungry and I ordered some food on DoorDash. While waiting for our food, my girlfriend fell asleep. She was worn out. There was a Wingstop near our place and I would always order from there. It was always the same dasher every time. So there was some trust there. In the delivery instructions, I put the code to get in the building. I picked the option where it cost more to get there quicker, but 30 minutes went by and still nothing. I was already notified that my food was picked up about 15 minutes ago. But then I noticed that the delivery driver was right by my apartment building on the DoorDash map and has been there for about 8 minutes already. I looked outside my third-story window. Then I saw the same car that always delivers here. The lights were on and the car was running. I went to my bathroom real quick and all of a sudden, I heard my buzzer go off as if someone was at the front door downstairs and wants to get in. That's weird because the only person I was expecting was the DoorDasher, and he has the code. I walked to the intercom and I said, hello? Can I help you? Yeah, it's your DoorDasher, and I got jumped by some guy. He took my phone and the screen was unlocked, so at this time you should maybe call the cops. He's on his way up to your apartment. I buzzed the actual Dasher up, and as he was saying that, there was a knock at my door. All I heard after this was, "Hey, it's your DoorDasher. I have your order." I didn't say anything. Then another knock. I told him just leave it, and then he said, "Nah, I can wait. The people around here look pretty sketchy." I then told him it's okay and I'm not dressed. I told him to leave after that. Then there was a pause. "So, what exactly are you wearing?" And the guy started messing with the door handle trying to get in. I had a complete brain fart. I forgot to call the cops. At the same time, my girlfriend is limping out of our room, asking what was going on. Then I heard tussling and fighting outside our apartment door. I told her to go in our room and call the cops. I opened the door and the DoorDash guy was getting choked and beat up on the ground by the crazy guy. So I did what anyone else would do in the situation. I closed the door and I ran back in the apartment. That dude was so big. There was no need for both of us to get beat up or killed, so I'm good. I heard the fighting stop, and then there were more knocks at the door. "Hey, it's the DoorDasher. I have your order." I thought to myself that this guy was out of his freaking mind. My girlfriend yelled from the other room that the police should be here soon. I looked out of my peephole as we were waiting, and the guy was just standing there, while the real DoorDash guy was laid out on the floor. The cops got there pretty quick and arrested the guy. When they got there, the DoorDash guy stood up and he told them what happened. So when he pulled up, he was updating something in his phone for DoorDash. As he stood outside of his car, all of a sudden, some guy came out of nowhere and smacked him a few times, then he punched him and knocked him out. He took his phone and the food and went to the apartment. I don't know who that guy was and why he chose us, but I'm glad that DoorDasher warned us. I've never had anything like this happen to me before, so I'm not sure if perhaps I'm overthinking it. I'm a relatively short girl, which is why I didn't even want to go outside and see if it was just a matter of the guy wanting to personally hand over the food. So yesterday at around 5 a.m., my friend had ordered me some DoorDash. We always put the leave at the door option, especially when it's in the morning, so it just turns into a matter of waiting for the dasher to leave. However, the guy I got yesterday scared the hell out of me. We had gotten a DoorDash notification that the food was dropped off, ready for pickup. I didn't notice until later, but there was no picture. I was just about to walk out, but before I opened the door, I looked out the window when I noticed that he was just standing there. Not on his phone, not trying to see if he was at the right house. Nothing. No kind of movement, just standing there. I was a bit confused, so I told my friend. I asked if she had put the leave at the door option, and she said she had. So I waited a bit before she decided to call and remind him to just leave it at the door. I can see his phone lighting up, but he never answered. He ignored every call and every text. He even answered once and immediately hung up on her. It wasn't even a matter of stealing my food. If that was the case, he would have just drove off with it. He spent a while waiting, and at one point almost went out when I no longer saw him. But I realized that he was just standing behind one of the bushes. Then he just sat in his car across the street, waiting. He hadn't even left the food at the fence. He just took it with him and he waited in his car. He even drove off angrily, almost like he was upset that I didn't go out to see. So when he drove off, that was around the same time that he hung up on my friend. All the times that he waited, outside the fence, behind the bush, and at his car, it lasted around 10 to 15 minutes each. I had no doubt that this guy was up to something. He was a little weird. Then that was confirmed a few days later when I saw that a DoorDash driver tried kidnapping a little girl when she came out to get her food. And it was that same guy. I'm not gonna lie, that was one of the weirdest nights of my life. This happened about a year and a half ago. I was at work, night shift, a little past midnight, and I ordered some DoorDash for myself and my supervisor. I was happy to see that I had the same driver as last time, as I work in a small building among other identical buildings with a convoluted road system in between them all. It can be a little confusing to someone not used to it. I had been watching the map and went outside when I saw that he was close. I stood under a cluster of bright lights in our parking lot, wearing neon yellow. You couldn't miss me. I immediately get a call from my driver asking me to come to him. I look around and I don't see anyone until I walk a couple yards to the center of the lot. He's sitting on the side of my building by the dumpster where there's no light. He also has his lights off. I'm thinking, what the hell, dude? I start waving my arms and telling him I'm in front of the building and he's on the side. He hangs up and just chills there for a minute. At this point, I'm really annoyed because our food is getting cold and this guy delivered to me before in the same exact spot a week before. Finally, he turns his lights on and comes over to me. As soon as he pulls up, he's speaking another language into his phone, which then translates in English. Something like, "Hello, I'm practicing English. I need new friends. Will you be my friend?" And then he puts the phone toward me. I feel like I'm speaking to a child and I just say, "Oh, that's a cool app." And I look at him, just waiting. We just stared at each other for a few seconds. Keep speaking into the app about needing friends and I tell him that my supervisor is waiting for me. And I reach my hand out for the food. So when he reaches out, he actually touches my hand and then asks for my number, but he tugged on me slightly. At this point, the fact that he had tried to get me in the dark, plus his persistence, turned my growing annoyance into fear. I tell him I need the food and he asked me to get in his car in perfect English. Thank the Lord that at this moment, someone in my sister building comes out and makes their way over to the lot. He finally gives me my food and scurries off, which freaked me out. Why after all of that would he speed off at the sight of another person? And how did he just learn English that quick? First he wasn't speaking it clearly, but then out of nowhere he spoke it very well. Clearly his intentions were not good. I reported all of this to DoorDash at the time, as well as my local police and social media. and it turns out that he's done this to someone before who lives about 2 miles away from me. She had also ordered late night, and he apparently asked her if she lived alone, and if they could hang out while holding her food hostage. DoorDash assured me they deactivated him, but his boldness plus the fact that he seems to only drive late at night makes me think he does this a lot and has probably already assaulted someone. Again, I'm just glad that other person walked out of that building next to ours.
Growing up, I lived in the middle of the woods. No neighbors for about a mile on each side, and we owned 60 acres of forest and a swamp after that. So I basically lived in the middle of nowhere. One summer when I was about 14, I was out in the middle of the woods playing with my dog, when I kept feeling something hit my elbow. I'd go to throw Max's ball and the bump would make me throw it straight up in the air. Assuming it was just me bumping it on the trees or something, I just ignored it. After the 4th or 5th time of it happening, I thought, well, this sucks. I'll just go home. Walking back, I felt uneasy, but I knew it was just me freaking myself out because we were alone. About an hour later, Max and I are at home on the couch when the garage door opens and he starts barking. I hop up to, go let my mom and dad in, even though they were home really early. I peered through the peephole and saw the door was still shut and no one was in the garage. Quieting Max down, I opened the door slowly and I called out for my dad. Nothing. No response at all. So I got out to check the door and it's still locked. Okay, sure. Weird, but oh well. Max heard it too, so at least I know I'm not going crazy. About 20 minutes later, I hear the door open again, and this time Max starts growling like crazy. I quiet him down again and just assume it's the wind or something making noise, even though by this point my heart is racing. I hear footsteps come up the stairs and think, oh geez, Dad really is home this time. And I hop up and run to the door. It starts to jiggle, so I run faster to let him in. I peek through the hole, and even though my hand is loosely around the jiggling handle, there's no one on the other side of the door. Terrified, I go hide on the couch with all the lights on, but Max is still growling. About an hour after that, I start to feel a little better even though I'm still terrified, and then I hear the door handle jiggle again. This time it was Max jiggling it. He needed to go outside, and the only way outside is through the garage. Fantastic. I literally sprint with him to the kennel, and as I'm standing in there, I decide to ask this thing questions to make myself feel better because I knew it wouldn't answer me. Thinking about what to ask, my eyes are drawn to the huge, heavy oak door on the kennel. It was always open because it was too heavy for me to move easily. So I said out loud, "Okay, Ghost, if you're really here, shut this heavy door." Then nothing. A minute goes by, nothing. Max is still sniffing around. I turn around and yell at him to hurry up, and then from behind me I hear click. I whipped around and saw the giant door had swung shut and latched. Okay, clearly it was just the wind. It wasn't really windy, but it was the wind, for sure, it had to be. So I proceed. "Okay, Ghost, that was the wind. If you're really real, you'll open the massive door back up." Then nothing. I relax a bit and then squat down with my head on my knees, reminiscing about how lame I just was being scared when I hear click, clack. The door was now wide open. Max was done, so we booked it back into the house, locking every door in the house. For the next 4 hours, I would hear the footsteps on the stairs and the door handle jiggling every few minutes, until finally, around 11 p.m. my dad walks and yells at me for wasting electricity. I never told him or my mom about it until about 4 months later, when my dad came in from hunting after dark. He looked shaken, and I asked him what was wrong. He said he aimed at 2 deer but missed both completely because it felt as if something was hitting his elbow and making him shoot way above the deer. That's when I told him everything. A few years back, I rented an apartment from a friend of mine. He had recently bought it and I had completely renovated it. He had put it up for sale but couldn't find a buyer, so I offered to rent it in the meantime. After moving in, I realized there was something wrong with the lady next door. She was about 45 but looked a lot older. She would sit up all night listening to Christian radio shows and talking loudly to someone. It got to the point where I couldn't sleep, so I went over to her place and I asked her to keep it down. She opened her door and I got a quick peek. All her walls had crosses painted on them in different colors, and words like Jesus and angels scribbled everywhere. The windows were painted black, letting no light in at all. It was damp, yellow-stained 50-year-old carpets, dog shit and cockroaches everywhere. But no dog, though. I asked her to please keep it down, but she just looked at me and shut the door. Then she turned up the radio even louder. The next night, I had my girlfriend staying over. I wake up in the middle of the night and I see a shadow of a person next to the bed looking at us sleeping. I think I'm hallucinating, as I usually do in the dark when I'm sleepy. But then the shadow started talking. It's my neighbor, and she's holding something in her hand. She broke in during the night, and who knows how long she stood there. She tells me that I should lock my door at night. The next morning, I hear someone making strange noises below my bedroom window. It's my neighbor talking to herself in tongue. She has a plastic bag in her hand with her rotting dead dog inside. It's hot as hell outside and I can smell the death from the bag. At this point, I'm scared, and she's obviously very insane. I go upstairs and I knock on another person's door and ask what the hell is going on. The guy is as scared as me. Apparently she broke into his apartment one evening as well while he was watching TV with his kids. He got up from the couch to go get a snack only to find her behind the couch staring at him, just holding a power drill. Now I know what was in her hand. At this stage, I'm basically just crapping myself. I call the cops and they all know about her. Apparently she is a violent schizo and she hasn't taken her meds. But they can't force her or enter her apartment without her permission because she owns it. The only thing they can do is get her when she goes outside. I sit up for the next 2 days waiting for her to run out of cigarettes. When I hear her leave at 2 a.m. to go across the road to the 7-Eleven, I call the cops. They have 3 cars and a special van over in less than 2 minutes. They restrain her and throw her in the van and drive off to some institution in less than a minute, and it's like she was never there. I never seen her again, but I still have nightmares about her looking at me when I'm asleep.
In the dense woods of Maryland, where whispers of mysterious creatures lingered, Alex found himself alone on a moonlit night. As he ventured deeper into the forest, an eerie silence enveloped the surroundings. The only sounds were the crunching of leaves beneath his boots. Suddenly, an otherworldly screech pierced the air, sending shivers down Alex's spine. Panic set in as he fumbled for a flashlight, casting a feeble beam into the darkness. Shadows danced, revealing gnarled branches that seemed to twist into grotesque forms. Unseen eyes observed Alex from the shadows as the air grew thick with an ominous presence. A loud growl echoed, chilling his bones. The atmosphere became suffocating, and the distant howls of nocturnal creatures faded into an unsettling silence. Out of the shadows emerged a snallygaster, a monster creature with wings that seemed to blend seamlessly with the night. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light as it circled above, creating an eerie symphony of wing beats. Alex's heart raced as he stumbled backward, trying to escape the creature's malevolent gaze. Branches snapped behind him, and the creature descended, revealing its monstrous form. Its elongated beak, lined with razor-sharp teeth, opened in a guttural hiss. Frozen with fear, Alex could only watch as the snallygaster advanced, each step echoing like a death knell. Desperation fueled his escape, but the creature matched his every move with uncanny precision. The forest seemed to close in, creating a labyrinth of terror. With seconds ticking away, Alex glimpsed at a dilapidated shack in the distance and sprinted towards it, praying for sanctuary. The snallygaster's menacing screech echoed, growing louder as it closed the gap. Alex slammed the door shut, barricading it with trembling hands. In the claustrophobic darkness, the creature's anguished cries reverberated, and the air was thick with a malevolent presence. As the minutes stretched agonizingly, the relentless onslaught ceased. Silence settled over the shack, leaving Alex paralyzed with fear. The night seemed to hold its breath, haunted by the lingering presence of the snallygaster, a creature that defied explanation, leaving only the echoes of a harrowing encounter in the depths of the Maryland woods.
I was sitting in the kids' bedroom putting them to sleep, my husband in the living room working. The house was very quiet. We heard someone turn the knob on the back door and bump it hard twice, as if they were trying to shove the door open. My husband brought me the shotgun and went exploring outside with the pistol. Never did see anyone. The weird thing, I usually don't end up locking the doors until we go to bed. But for some reason I had a nagging feeling that I should lock it early that night. If I hadn't, God knows what would have happened. It was obvious that we were home and at least someone was awake. So whatever they wanted was not just to take things. My husband spoke with his fellow officers, but nothing was ever found. He did find a footprint by the garage the next morning. It was way too big to be his. We waited and we waited for follow-up break-ins, but nothing ever happened. I am a stay-at-home mom, so I kept the pistol within reach for a while when the kids were at school and I was home alone. Nothing like that has ever happened again. However, a few months later, my 11-year-old son didn't move out of his room because he felt like he was being watched. He said he kept hearing footsteps outside the windows. Before we moved in, his room was a back porch that previous owners had boxed in. The old concrete porch steps are still outside his room, and it led to a big window the previous owners put in, but it didn't open. I'm sure it could have been a neighborhood stray cat, but this was just a few months after the door incident. One of my childhood homes had a balcony that was attached to both my mother's bedroom and mine via a big glass door. Next to the balcony are 2 trees. One I often used to climb up and down from the balcony. One night when my brother and mother weren't home, I was reading in bed with a very dim reading light. I heard what sounded like something moving in one of the trees outside, but this didn't worry me as we had possums and bats that are common in our area. Right now I had a thin curtain on the glass door that separated my room and the balcony, and the doors faced out toward the street where a street lamp was always visible through my curtains. Shortly after hearing the tree rustling noises, I see a shadow slowly move past the doors, at which point I immediately turned off my reading light and freeze like a deer in headlights. The shadow is tall, so it wasn't any neighborhood kid. The The person moved slowly, creeping as though they would not want to be seen. They wouldn't likely be able to see into my room, but I could see them thanks to the streetlights behind them. They moved past my doors out of sight. I sat there, unable to move or even think about what to do other than be absolutely still. That is, until I heard another sound. The sound of someone trying to open the glass door to my mother's room. I didn't know if she had locked them or not, but I wasn't taking chances. I moved as quickly and as silently as I could to my bedroom door and I locked it. I listened for what the person was doing now. They were still jiggling the glass door handle, but it sounded like the doors were not opening. I felt relief. This person couldn't get in, surely. All I had to do was wait for them to realize that, and they would leave, right? Well, I heard light footsteps move back along the balcony to my set of doors, and I saw the shadow stop directly in front of them. Again, I froze. He couldn't see me. He couldn't know I could see him. I saw a shadow of a hand reach up to my door handles and my heart stopped. Had I actually locked the doors myself today? I was out there earlier. What if I forgot? The seconds leading up to him grabbing the handle felt like an eternity, but the door did not open. It was locked. I sighed such a sigh of relief I was worried he heard it. After this, he began pacing the length of the balcony. I didn't have a phone. The landline was at the other end of the house, but I was scared to take my eyes off of him. I was silently crying and praying that he would just leave. Then I heard him stop moving, and he said, "I could just break the glass, you know." Before I could even process this, I saw car headlights turn around the corner of my street and then stop at our property gate. My mom was home. The person on the balcony moved out of sight, and I heard a loud thump as they jumped off of it. When my mom came inside, I was hysterical and was barely coherent in telling her what happened. Eventually, I got the message across and she called the police. They never found or caught anyone, but a neighbor reported a truck in the street that matched the description of a truck that had been reported recently for attempting child abductions near my school a block away.
First jobs I had was as an after-hours janitor at Walmart. I worked from 9:30 p.m. to 6 a.m. when the managers got there, and I was typically with two others, but it varied, and a few nights I was alone. One of the only things I found creepy was the warehouse downstairs. It was the same exact size as the actual Walmart store. We had to go down there to grab the soap to run the machine that we used to wash the floors, but we barely needed to, as there were always some left out for us. So one night I was there alone. I had used all the floor cleaner and I had to go down to the warehouse to get some soap. It already had an eerie vibe to it and it was very dark down there. I walked over to grab some soap and this was around 2 in the morning, so I still had quite a bit more time left on my shift. I was grabbing the soap when I heard echoed footsteps, but I was the only one there. I walked out of the aisle to see what looked like a male in his mid-20s crouching as if he were sneaking up on someone. I asked him, "Who are you?" He stood up straight very fast, like I just didn't see him creeping up on me. He said his name was Josh, and this was his first night on the job, and he was told to look for another coworker for some assistance. He then asked, "Are you the only person here?" He seemed a little off because he was looking around when he asked that question. Then he kept saying stuff to ease my anxiety. I was creeped out, but he seemed legit at this point because he knew the manager's name and he answered all of the questions I asked him. We started working and everything was going well. But he took an hour break at the end at around 5 o'clock, pretty much to get out of work early. He said he would see me tomorrow night, and I just told him goodbye. Then, as he was walking away, he literally turned around and stared at me for about 20 seconds, then turned back around and just left. Like it was nothing. Like that was regular. Like anybody would do that. They wouldn't. So the clock hit 6. Soon after, my managers arrived. I asked why they didn't tell me about Josh. He looked confused, but next what he told me made the hairs on my neck stand up. He told me there was no night employee with me and that I was there alone. He asked me was someone there with me. Then we talked about it for a few minutes and we went to go make a police report. So the police report was filed, but to my knowledge, nothing has really come up. I quit the job the next day and never went back to Walmart again, not even the shop.
When I was 11 years old, I spent the night hanging out with my closest friend at the time. I left around 7 o'clock. He was about 15 to 20 minute walk away from my house. It was the month of December, so it was icy and dark outside. While I was walking down the long sidewalk, I had to make a turn halfway. Across the turn down the sidewalk, I noticed a man way further down. He was alone at the moment. 10 seconds later, a 4-door car drove up to him. It was a long street till my turn, so I watched him talk to whoever was in the car. It sped off, and he just stopped, watching me as I walked. As I kept walking, all I heard was, "Hey you, come here, stop, hey you." So I freaked out. I started walking faster and then noticed he started running toward me. I started running for my life. Since the ground was covered in snow and ice, all I literally thought was, "Please, God, don't let me slip." I was crying, and I was running. He caught up extremely fast. I kept looking back and noticed the car slowly driving behind him. As I ran, I felt his arm reach out and try to grab the hood of my sweatshirt. By God's grace, his hand slipped, and I ran a block trying to find a house with the lights on. I finally found one and banged at the door, almost ready to break it down. This older couple finally answered, and I ran inside explaining what happened. The husband then went outside to try to find him. When he went out, he saw the man standing at the end of the street staring at him. Then he ran off. My mom called the police and pulled me out of school for 4 days afterward, and this guy was never found. For a while after, I would buy flowers and a card and leave it on the couple's step, thanking them for saving my life. God only knows what would have happened if he got me and dragged me to the car.
I am a high school dropout, but managed to have a second chance in night school. At the end of the lessons, sometimes I stay speaking a little bit with a friend of mine. Then I walk home. Takes around 15 minutes. While I was walking, I noticed on the other side of the street, in the bus station, a man. He was just staring at me. I tried to pretend that I hadn't seen him and started walking home. As I walked home, I kept looking back, thinking of that man that was looking at me at the bus station. I arrived home and went directly to my bedroom window and checked outside. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't followed, and to my relief, I wasn't. I still couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The next night, while I was walking home, I started hearing footsteps behind me. I thought nothing of it, but then the footsteps got louder. I looked back, and the bus station guy was running towards me. I started running. When I arrived home, I went directly upstairs to my bedroom as I did the day before. But this time, the guy was in front of my house, just standing there in the dark, looking at me. I was shocked to see that the guy had followed me home. I crouched near the window. I decided to take the phone out and call the cops. I called the cops, but when they arrived, the guy wasn't there anymore. A patrol car stayed in front of my house all night. I couldn't sleep at all. I couldn't sleep. The next night, I decided to stay home and skip school. I was on the couch watching TV when I heard a knock on the living room window. I looked to the window and I felt a huge weight in my body. The man that had been stalking me was at the window. He was pale and had a deformed eye. He kept smiling and waving at me. I ran upstairs to my bedroom, locked the door, and called the cops. While I was waiting for them, I heard glass breaking from downstairs. The guy was probably inside the house now. I started crying. I thought to myself, I'm about to die. All of a sudden, a loud bang on my bedroom door. He was trying to get in, but luckily, I heard the police siren. They entered the house and started shouting to the crazy guy to get down. The cops took the guy away. That night, I could not sleep one bit. Since that incident, I've never had problems again.
I was living in Las Vegas at the time and I was 19. I lived in a trailer park in Northtown, a not so nice area of Vegas. The trailers were about 10 feet apart at best. At about 11 p.m. I heard a sound of a body flopping on the ground from the trailer next door. It sounded like someone wrestling or fighting, but no yelling or loud voices. I then heard the screen door of the trailer open and the car speed off. I thought nothing of it and I just kept to myself. My roommate was at work and he wouldn't be home until the morning. I went to bed. I woke up to a tapping on my front door and it was a police officer. I woke up in a hurry and answered the door. The police officer told me I had to vacate the premises for my own safety. Apparently the sounds that I heard were from my neighbor who stabbed and killed someone in the trailer. The car driving away was the murder victim's friend who drove to Nelly Air Force Base for help. My neighbor kept the body in the house until the SWAT team showed up and extracted the man from the house via tear gas. This was just the beginning of crazy things that happened while out at West, but by far one of the most memorable. I worked third shift at the time. My kids told me I had started snoring. I didn't believe them and decided to record myself sleeping while they were in school. I turned the recorder on and said, "This is to see if I snore. First you could hear me breathing, then go into deep sleep. After a while, snoring. Then clear as day, two voices talking to each other over me. I was home alone. They said, 'Can she?' I don't think she can. I had the tape for years. I always thought they were wondering if I could hear them. I was house sitting for my friend and her dogs were acting crazy. They were barking at everything and anything that they heard. Eventually I heard a weird noise upstairs. I counted the dogs and they were all with me. You know that person you yell at looking around the house instead of just calling the police? Guess what? Yeah, that's me. The knife drawer was baby-proofed and I'm an idiot, so I grabbed a meat fork. I messaged the group chat that if they didn't get any updates from me every 5 minutes, they should call the cops. I went looking around. I tried to bring a dog with me, but they were not having any of it. Eventually, I found the source of the noise and was relieved to see that it was just the sink and it was the water running. I turned it off and I texted the group chat, "Never mind, it was just the sink, the water was running." One of my friends replied, "But who turned the sink on?" And immediately the freaking lever pulls forward and water started coming out. I rubber banded closed and hightailed it out of there. I sat there with a meat fork in hand watching movies all night. No way I was sleeping in that house. I grew up in a pretty quiet, although poor neighborhood. It was a lot of trailers and either kind elderly couples or most trailer trash people you've ever seen. There was the occasional house break-in or drunken street argument, but overall, it was fairly relaxed and we felt safe. I was about 10 years old, walking home from my bus stop. I was with my best friend, Teresa, who was 11. We always walked home together since we lived, on the same road, and we're the only two kids on that street. And the stop was a little less than a quarter mile from our houses also, hitting around a bend in the road. My house was closer, so I would usually leave Teresa to walk the rest of the way herself. It was only one house down from mine, so it wasn't really a big deal. This day, we were only 2 houses down from mine, when we heard a car coming up on the road behind us way too fast. We quickly moved into the grass, as our road had no sidewalks to avoid reckless drivers. However, as soon as the car got up to where we were, it stopped. I looked over to see a large white windowless van and a large white man in a driver's seat. He was now just idling forward as slowly as he could, staring at us with this hungry expression. He was grinning. He licked his lips a few times and kept nodding to himself. Just imagine to yourself a fat redneck trucker looking guy nodding to himself, saying things like, yeah, and slurping his lips. You have a mental image of that guy. We kept walking, but I kept watching him, thinking it was just weird, but whatever. As soon as his van had moved past where we could stare at him or he could stare at us, he slammed the gas and tore off to the end of the street. Just as Teresa and I started talking about how weird that was, we saw him stop at the end of our small street, turn around, and come speeding back towards us. We kept walking since we were almost to my house, but we were nervous. He stopped again when he got to us and slowly crawled by, looking at us the way a dog looks at steak. We were really afraid at this point and we walked faster, hoping this guy wasn't about to jump out and grab us. We made it to the edge of my yard, but I gave my friend a look to tell her to keep walking. I didn't want him to see what yard we went to. As soon as he was past us, he sped off around the bend where he came from. When we saw the van disappear around the corner, we took off running back to my house. We got inside before the van returned and I ran to tell my mom what happened. Teresa was crying and she called her mom to let her know the situation. We ended up seeing the van speed up and down our street 3 more times looking for us before finally giving up. We waited a good hour or so before my mom drove Teresa home. I never saw that guy or the van again, but I shudder to think that he may have been contemplating kidnapping us. So this story is about my friend Abe and I. We were playing basketball at my local elementary on a Sunday night. We were just playing the normal one-on-one and usually we're all alone, but this night was different. There was a middle-aged man sitting on the swings talking on the phone, and when we noticed him, he stood up and he left. We both thought it was a bit weird since normally nobody was there. Plus, he wasn't with anyone. About 30 minutes later, it was getting dark out, so we decided to leave. While we were just about to leave, we saw 3 men walk into the playground and sit on the swings. We noticed one of the men was the same guy we saw earlier. So we hightailed it out of there on my moped, and while we were leaving, we saw the guy stand up and run to their car. We thought we lost them in my neighborhood and believed it was safe to go hide in my house. I was supposed to be home alone all night, so Abe just decided to sleep over. We woke up at around 3 a.m. in the morning to a knocking sound on my window. I sleep in the basement, which is already scary enough. Me and Abe just decided it was our brains making noises. In the morning, I went to open my window because it smelled awful in my room. I saw a note written in terrible handwriting that read, "We just wanted to play basketball. There was no need to run." I sent the picture to my friend, and we never went back to that playground to play basketball at night ever again. One day when I was 10 years old, I stayed home sick from school. I was lying on the couch watching TV when all of a sudden I heard the doorbell ring. It was the postman. He told me he had a package to deliver, but it was so big that he needed me to help carry it in. I don't know why, but I knew something wasn't quite right. I didn't see his truck parked out front, so when I asked him where it was, he told me it was around the corner. I asked him why the regular postman wasn't here, and he said he was visiting family. He kept telling me to open the front door. I said I was sick and I wasn't allowed to leave the house. I told him my parents would pick up the package from the post office, but he said that'd be too much of a hassle and told me my mom would want me to take the package now. I told him I had to get my shoes first, and then I would come out and help him. Then I closed the front door, locked it, and ran to the back door and locked that too. I called our neighbor, who was a close family friend, and I begged her to come over right now. Then I stood at the front door window and stared at the man. When he saw me, he yelled through the door asking if I had found my shoes yet. I yelled back telling him that I called my neighbor to come up and carry the package because she was older and stronger. He just turned around and ran off. They never caught him. I always wonder if he ever managed to trick somebody else. When I was 15, my mother went out shopping and left me in charge of the house. It was starting to get dark and I realized my little brother was nowhere to be found. I asked my sister if she knew where he was, and she said he had gone to the park around the corner to kick his soccer ball around. I told her to watch the house while I was gone and ran off to the direction of the park. When I got there, I was surprised to find the park completely empty. I called out my brother's name, but there was no answer. I started to get worried, and all of a sudden I heard a faint muffled noise coming from my left. I turned just in time to see a tall figure disappearing behind a large fence. I sprinted as fast as I could. When I came around to the other side of the fence, I saw something that almost made me choke in horror. My little brother was being dragged down the alleyway by a tall man. I flew into a rage and tears of anger streamed down my face. I ran at him and he must have heard me coming because he turned around to face me and he dropped my younger brother. The tall man tried to grab me, but I was running at him so fast that when I slammed into him, it knocked him off his feet. He swore and tried to get back up, but I just started stomping on his face. Without stopping to ask questions, I picked my brother up and ran as fast as I could back to our house. By this time, it was pitch black outside and my mother was home. She was frantic with worry, and when she saw the look on our face, she realized that something bad had happened. As I explained, my brother and I started crying, and my mom gave us both the biggest hug ever, and she cried with us. Eventually, the police were called, but this guy was never found. When I was 14, I was waiting for the bus, and this pickup truck pulled up right beside me. The driver kept waving at me to come closer, and he held up a map. It seemed like he wanted directions. I went over to the truck and he rolled down the window. I didn't realize what was happening until he reached out and tried to grab me by my hair. I dropped my bag and ran for it as he sped off. When I got home, I woke up my mom and told her what had happened. She flipped out. Then we looked out the window, and guess who was there? The truck was sitting across the street, and the man was sitting in the driver's seat staring up at us. That's when I flipped out. My mom called the police and gave them the description, but the man drove off. Later on, the police called back to tell us that they had pulled someone over and wanted me to take a look at him. They put me in the back of an unmarked patrol car with tinted windows and drove me past the guy who was being questioned outside his truck, and it was him. I almost had a panic attack. They charged him with attempted kidnapping. It made all the local newspapers. The spot where they pulled him over was right in front of an elementary school. And when they searched his truck, they found rope, duct tape, and an axe.
I work on boats that transport different goods around, different parts of the world. So we like to travel across the ocean. So I've been everywhere. I'm not going to say exactly where we were, but it had been a few days since we took off from shore. The next boat behind us took off 4 hours after we did. This was the time of the year where we run into a lot of ice islands or glaciers, so we were used to this. This time, it was a little different. I remember us doing our usual, and all of a sudden we hit something. We always graze ice, but we continue to move. This time we hit it and it stopped almost immediately. It was in the middle of the night, so we looked overboard and we couldn't see anything. So we shined our big spotlight on what was in the way, and it was a big ice chunk. We also noticed a huge hole in the side of the ship, and water was rushing in. Then noticed that the ship was sinking. We knew another ship was coming this way, so we felt okay with what was happening because we knew that ship can help us. We got in contact with that ship and they said they were actually 5 hours away and not 4. The ship was sinking at a rapid pace, so we all exited the ship and got onto a huge ice island. There were about 20 of us on this big chunk of ice just watching the ship sink. An hour went by and one of the other workers asked,
What's that?
Everyone spotted what he was talking about. We all saw 2 glowing eyes on a head that was slightly sticking out of the water. It was just floating there. We could tell that it was eyeballs because of the moonlight. It had to be at least 300 feet away from us. So as we're standing there were at least 5 small ice islands between us and whatever that was in the water. But it wasn't moving. We all watched it as it was watching us watch the boat. So some of us quit paying attention to it, and another hour goes by. Then someone yells out that it was moving. Everyone looks at it again, and those eyes were moving closer to us in the water, with that head halfway out of the water. At this time, it gets to an ice island, and it stops. It doesn't get on the island. It's still far away from us, but it's closing in. Then we see it get out of the water and it climbs on the island. Then one of the guys says, "Oh my God, that's a polar bear." It stood there and it stared at us. And it was sniffing in the air. It was trying to figure us out. Then it walks forward and then it jumps back into the water and begins to swim toward us again. It was closing in. But then it stopped again and was just watching us. So it watched us for about 20 minutes. Then it began to swim again. And at this time the sun was coming up and we could clearly see that its head was sticking out of the water. And when it came upon another island, it climbed up on it and began to watch us even more. At this time, it was about 100 feet away from us. It had to be about 2 more islands before it got to us. Everyone was afraid, and at this time it was moving slowly. And that helped ease our anxiety, honestly. We knew that the other boat would be there in about 2 hours at this point. Then the bear jumps back into the water and it swims toward us. But at this time, it was going at a faster pace. It climbs on the island next to ours, and everyone on our island runs to the opposite side of our island. But there was nowhere else to go after that. We couldn't jump in the water because we'd freeze to death. Then it stares for a few seconds and then it jumps back into the water. And it swims and then it climbs onto our ice island. But it was going slowly. As soon as it gets to our piece of ice, it just stands there and it stares at us. Everyone was freaking out. Then it starts walking toward us. And out of nowhere, it became very aggressive and running toward us and making noises, grunting. We were all moving and trying to stay away from it. Then I heard something as I was running that I would never forget. There was this guy named William. He began to scream in a way that I can still hear it in my head today. I looked back and the polar bear had him. It was clawing at him, on top of him. Then he stops making noises and quits moving. But the polar bear continued to do what it was doing. We knew he was dead. Then it took his body in the water, then onto the next ice island, and it feasted. It did it slowly, very slow. The worst part of it is that the polar bear never took his eyes off of us as it ate. So it was pretty much telling us that we were next and there was nothing that we could do about it. Another hour went by and it stopped. There was red everywhere. The polar bear was not white anymore. It began to walk toward the edge of the ice island it was on, and then we heard a loud horn. We looked in the distance and it was another ship. It was the ship that we were talking about. The polar bear stopped. Then it turned and looked at the ship, then began to walk toward the edge again. Then the ship blew the horn again, over and over. They noticed what was happening. The bear stopped and it turned. Then it looked at us. Then it looked at the ship again. And it just stood there, looking back and forth. Then it turned away from us, jumped in the water, and simply just swam away. We all just sat there staring at William on the other ice island, as it didn't even look like him. He was lifeless. Everyone was crying or they were in shock. Eventually the other ship came and got us. We retrieved what was left of William and we got out of there. That day mentally scarred everyone who was there, and it's something that we can't forget.
Sarah hesitated at the door of the run-down apartment building, her hand poised to knock. Pregnant and desperate, she had been living out of her car for weeks, barely scraping by. She needed this cleaning job, no matter how ominous the building seemed. Inside, she found Alex, a survivor raised in an orphanage with haunted eyes and a secret darkness lurking beneath the surface. He offered her a room in his cramped apartment, claiming, "I can't stand to see you living, well, in your condition, in your car." Grateful but wary, Sarah accepted, unaware of the horrors that awaited her within those walls. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah settled into her new life with Alex. He was kind to her, providing food, shelter, and spending cash, but there was something unsettling about him, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. She brushed off her unease, grateful for his generosity, but curious about his secrets. Sarah meticulously tended to their apartment, ensuring it was always spotless, the laundry done, and healthy meals were prepared. Meanwhile, Alex returned home with an unusual scent of iron, stains of crimson on his work clothes, and an evident wariness. Despite Sarah's persistent inquiries about his work, Alex remained evasive, attributing his condition to odd jobs. One evening, Alex arrived home with a bleeding wound on his hand, resembling a dog bite. Unable to deceive Sarah, he confided in her, revealing his troubled past and the shadows that haunted him. Alex disclosed his role as a hunter, dedicated to safeguarding humanity from the bloodthirsty monsters he called vampires. Sarah listened intently as Alex divulged his secrets, her eyes reflecting a mixture of concern and understanding. She echoed, a shiver running down her spine. Alex sighed heavily, the weight of his burden palpable. "It's a long story," he began, his voice tinged with wariness. But suffice it to say, I've been hunting them for years. They're real, Sarah, and they're out there, preying on the innocent. Someone has to stop them. Sarah was shocked by Alex's revelation, and she needed proof, something to convince her that he wasn't lying or crazy. Alex observed her skeptic demeanor and led her into his hidden armory, where he revealed the secrets of his trade. There, amidst the ancient crosses and sophisticated weaponry, including a crossbow modified to shoot a wooden stake at high speed, lay the body of a once staked, now dead vampire, a grim reminder of the horrors that lurked in the shadows. Sarah stared at the lifeless creature before her, and goosebumps did rise on her flesh. She questioned, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex nodded solemnly. "I'm afraid so," he replied, his gaze fixed on the vampire's pale green, lifeless face. "And they're out there, Sarah. They walk among us." Sarah's mind raced as she absorbed the grim reality of their situation. She had never imagined that vampires could exist, let alone walk among them in plain sight. But there, in Alex's armory, the evidence lay before her in the form of ancient crosses and detailed diagrams depicting the anatomy of vampires. "Look at their fangs," Alex said, pointing to the diagram depicting the anatomy of vampires. "They're predators, designed for one thing only." Sarah shuddered, her eyes fixed on the image. Alex nodded grimly. A telltale sign of their otherworldly nature. But the worst part? He paused, his gaze meeting hers. "They're afraid of crosses. It's like a symbol of our faith repels them, keeps them at bay." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "They sleep in them during the day," Alex explained. "It's where they retreat to, where they regenerate their strength. That's why we have to find them while they're vulnerable." As Sarah listened, a sense of dread crept over her, but alongside it was a growling determination. She said, her voice steady despite the fear. Alex's gaze softened as he reached out to steady Sarah, his voice calm but urgent. "There's something else you need to know," he said, his words weighted with gravity. "The vampire we're hunting, it's Ronald McDonald, the man who dresses up as the mascot at the local McDonald's." Sarah's eyes widened in shock, a surge of disbelief coursing through her veins. Ronald McDonald, the beloved icon of childhood memories and fast food commercials, was a vampire? It seemed impossible, yet Alex's solemn expression left no room for doubt. As the realization sunk in, Sarah felt scared. If Ronald McDonald was indeed a vampire, then he was responsible for the disappearances of children that had plagued their community. And now it was up to her and Alex to stop him, whatever the cost. Determined to confront the vampire lurking beneath the facade of the iconic clown, Sarah and Alex embarked on a rigorous training regimen. Alex coached Sarah in hand-to-hand combat, teaching her to defend herself against the supernatural threats they would face. Meanwhile, he meticulously crafted a special bodysuit tailored to accommodate Sarah's pregnant condition, ensuring her safety during their perilous mission. After weeks of preparation, the fateful morning arrived. Armed and suited up, Sarah and Alex ventured to the local McDonald's, their hearts pounding with anticipation. Alex deftly picked the lock on the door, and together they descended into the secret cellar of the restaurant. There, they were met with a chilling sight. Ronald McDonald, asleep in his coffin, surrounded by his helpless boys and girls strung up by their wrists from the rafters. With adrenaline coursing through their veins, Sarah and Alex leaped into action, intent on driving a stake into Ronald McDonald's heart. However, Ronald proved to be a formidable adversary, his speed and strength far surpassing that of an ordinary human being. He knocked the stake crossbow out of Alex's hand and struck him so hard that Alex was flung against the opposing wall. Sarah found herself caught in Ronald's iron grip, her throat constricted as he studied her helplessly dangling form.
After I drain your friend's lifeblood, I think I'll turn you into a double quarter pounder with cheese.
Alex re-emerged and struck Ronald across his cheek, smearing his clown makeup, revealing the sickly green hue of his undead flesh beneath. In a desperate bid to turn the tide, Sarah retrieved Alex's customized weapon, the crossbow that fired wooden stakes. With precision and determination, she aimed for Ronald McDonald's heart, firing the stake deep into the vampire's chest. With a guttural roar, Ronald McDonald fell to the ground, vanquished by the combined efforts of Sarah and Alex.
You naughty kids!
Breathing heavily, Sarah and Alex surveyed the aftermath of their battle. With Ronald McDonald defeated, they knew that their community was safe once more. They freed the children, called the police, and quickly departed, but not without taking Ronald's body with them for future examination. As they transported Ronald McDonald's lifeless body back to Alex's apartment, Sarah and Alex knew that their fight against the forces of evil was far from over. But together, they were prepared to face whatever horrors awaited them in the shadows.
Some friends and I were doing some night fishing on the James River. We were sitting along the shoreline with a nice fire going, accompanied by usual idle talk and a few beers, when suddenly, everyone just stopped talking like a switch was flipped off. We were all staring across the river and felt as if something or someone was staring back. It was a very uneasy feeling, to which some of the group tried to shake off with a typical macho humor, when a blood-curdling sound erupted from the other side of the shore that froze everyone in their tracks. This sound was unlike any other that I had heard, and it made every hair on my body vibrate and tingle. The only way I can describe it is it sounded like a wild person with no language skills being gutted alive. No words, just this high-pitched, blood-curdling scream. Nobody moved or said a word. We all just sat there fixed in our stare, when just as suddenly a second scream was let loose with even more force than the first. By this time, several of us were sprinting to our trucks just to go get our firearms. Our trucks were about 20 or 30 feet away. We all sat there quietly with our eyes fixed, staring toward the opposite shore, watching the light from our fire reflecting off the rocks. So hours later, we just packed it up and left. We were feeling very unsettled. We never did figure out that one. We never even thought about what could that be, or as to what was on the opposite bank. It was early in the morning, around 2 or 3 a.m., and I was in a very open area waiting for my boss to return with some equipment. As I was waiting, I got that feeling like I was being watched by something that didn't want me out there and had some intent on harming me.
I stood up and I looked around. The moon was very bright that night, and I could clearly see all the way to the tree lines, and probably 50 yards on both sides of me. There was nothing around. I calmed down a bit and I took my pack off just to get a drink. As I opened my drink, I hear this whoosh whoosh sound flying through the air from behind me. It was like the sound that a stick makes if you throw it overhand. I literally dove out of the way, and with my bag falling to the ground and my drink flying through the air, spilling as I jumped away, I didn't know what it was. I recover from my diving experience and I take my radio out of my bag to radio my boss. I go, "I'm not trying to freak you out or anything, but I'm on my way back to the shop. I just had something thrown at me." As I'm talking to him, I'm looking around on the snowy ground for anything that could have been hurled at me. There was nothing on the ground but snow. I had no idea what the hell was going on at this point. Here's a reply of, "I've already got a head start on you. I'll see you there." Sounded out like he was breathing very hard and like he was running. I gather my stuff and I start hauling my butt back to the shop. I get back and I meet up with my boss. He's pacing back and forth in our shop, freaking out. I get him to calm down and he tells me he was on his way back up to me when he got the same feeling I got before something got thrown at him. He said after he got that feeling, he stopped to look around and heard something clearly two-legged just start walking towards him, barely crunching in the snow. Then he said it started running at him, but there was nothing in sight. All of the sounds of movement stopped and he froze to listen for more sounds. Then he said a hot breath was sitting on the back of his neck and he proceeded to freak the hell out. He said he ran the whole way back to the shop. About halfway back is when he heard me on the radio. The crazy part about this whole thing is that the area we were working has several burial mounds in the woods from Native Americans. Apparently, they were all also used to be an altar of some kind, maybe out of some stone that was buried during the construction project a few decades ago.
Alien-looking creature prowling in northern New Mexico had a lot of people uttering the word Skinwalker, a well-known legend in Indian country.
It's downright creepy.
This all happened about 5 years ago. One night, a few of my friends decided after a night of hanging out that we go on an adventure at about 3 a.m. We took a ride about 50 miles in this old Spanish ruin in New Mexico that once was the seat of an inquisition. I can't for the life of me remember what the place is called. So we jumped the front gate to the place and we start exploring. One of my friends brought a flute with him and he started playing it. In about 30 seconds to his mediocre playing, something started screaming really, really loud on the tops of the long destroyed walls of the place. It was going from wall to wall really quick, screaming the most blood-curdling scream you've ever imagined. We got out of there really quick, but one of my friends pissed his pants, and we drove for a few hours to Bandelier National Monument, where he planned to camp out at for maybe the rest of the weekend. We got to the Bandelier at around 6 or 7 a.m. and set up our camp. After a few hours of just talking about what the hell just happened at the ruins, I went to take a piss about 300 feet away from our camp. This is where everything started to get a little fuzzy. I remember seeing 2 dust devils coming my way. And when I turned around again, 2 of my friends were there and they were motioning me to follow them. I couldn't help but to follow them, like I was being pulled behind them in shackles. I followed them for what seemed like 10 to 15 minutes and then I snapped out of it. These weren't my friends, because they had bright red hair, but they had my friends' faces with cat eyes. But both of my friends were brunettes. I stopped walking and they looked at me with probably the most terrorizing gaze I've ever seen. Monsters in movies are nothing compared to this. I turned around and ran as fast as I could back the way I came from. After like 5 minutes of a full sprint, I got back to that rock that I pissed at and I found our camp. Everyone was there. still sitting around talking, and didn't even notice that I was gone. I told them what happened with the look-alike Skinwalkers, and we packed up everything and left probably within 10 minutes and got the hell back to Albuquerque. One night when I was 15 years old, I arrived home just after midnight and my parents were already in bed. I decided to leave the back door unlocked for my older brother since he was sleeping over a friend's house. Big mistake. In the middle of the night, I awoke to feel something cold and metallic pressing on my neck. At first I thought it was my brother playing a prank on me, but then I couldn't see the pitch black bedroom. Then a big hairy hand covered my nose and mouth. I couldn't breathe. I heard a deep rasping voice say, "If you make any noise, I'll kill you." After my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I could make out the shape of a man leaning over me. There was no face, just a black mask with holes cut out for the eyes. He was holding a knife to my throat. I knew my parents were asleep in the next room, so I tried to make as much noise as I could, but the man's hand muffled my screams. I kicked my legs trying to bang on the walls so my parents could hear. All of a sudden, through the screams, I can hear my parents get up and they're running towards my room. When my parents opened the bedroom door, they were confronted by a terrifying scene. All they could see in the darkened room was a big black silhouette bent over me and holding a knife to my throat. As soon as he saw the knife, my father jumped on top of the intruder and struggled with him. My mother grabbed the man's wrist and wrestled the knife out of his hand. My father managed to get his arm around the masked man's neck and began to choke him. I grabbed my cell phone and I ran outside to call 911 as my parents kept the intruder pinned to the bedroom floor until the police arrived. The bedroom door burst open and a police officer ran in holding a gun yelling, "Don't move or I'll blow your head off." The police handcuffed the intruder and dragged him out of the house. When police searched the man's truck, they found a variety of weapons and some bloody clothes. It turned out that the masked man had already murdered 2 people a few days before. My family and I, we had no way of knowing it, but we had just captured a serial killer. And the scariest part about this is that it can happen to anyone at any time. This was real. The killer's name is Adam Leroy Lane, and he'll be spending the next 25 years to 30 years in prison. What I've learned from this is to always lock my back door.